the holy day when we all stood at Sinai and Moses received the Torah. It is said that the mountain shook violently with God's presence and that the people could hear the lightning and see the thunder. It is the day of revelation, as Rabbi Mark just said. And it's the knowing of the truth of who we really are. This is how it was for me just after we came out of Egypt. We had been in the desert for some time now. I've actually lost track of time because it doesn't really matter. It's not necessary. You see, the cloud tells us when to go and when to stay. And the manna arrives just on time. Everything that we need is given to us. And we lack for nothing. And yet, I don't know, it seems to me that there's a restlessness in the community. Besides the cloud, and some say that the cloud is really God, other people tell me what to do. Moses, of course, tells us all what to do. And then there's my husband. He's a really nice man. He's kind, and I'm very blessed to have that. But, well, he tells me what to do too. I guess I'm just sort of on the bottom of the rung here. I'm really good for making children and for taking care of the household and for doing what I'm told, following orders. Well, the restlessness seems to be growing, and my sister whispers that we are all to go stand at the mountain tonight so that Moses can talk to God. I'll tell you a secret. When I was in Egypt, I used to talk to God. You know, just the easy things like, could I have a healthy baby? And can I keep my house? And I mean, we were slaves. It wasn't an easy life. But I wouldn't tell anybody else that I talked to God. I mean, who am I to talk to God? But, well, you know, it was pretty good. So we follow, we do what we're told to do. And we are all told now to get into our finest robes, to clean up and to get ready to walk to the mountain. We make such a sight marching to that mountain. Someone starts a beautiful chant and the chant just sort of envelops me. And I feel my body straighten up and my feet hit the ground in a different way. My young daughter thinks that the mountain is so beautiful. And so do I. I see a golden light surrounding the entire mountain, glowing with what feels like love beyond belief. I'm engulfed in that love and light, and the ground seems to just rock back and forth very gently. I'm not afraid. My feet are firmly planted in my heart. Well, my heart is wide open. The most beautiful field of flowers appears, flowers that I can feel without touching, flowers that I can taste just from the smell. The garden of revelation is growing, and I hear a voice that says, "This is where you live. It will look different with your physical eye, but this is really where you live. You are good and whole and worthy of the spark of me that lives in you. Fan that spark with gratitude, and I will be sure that your heart is filled with love and your life is filled with joy." The next thing I remember, we are all walking back to our tents. All around me, people are talking about how frightened they were because the ground shook so violently and they could see thunder and hear lightning and the mountains seemed to be consumed by fire. Well, I guess you can imagine, I was just not sure how that could possibly be, how people could have such different images. I knew that Moses had brought down the Torah, brought down some new rules and regulations for all of us. And as much as I love my husband, this wasn't something I thought I could talk with him about. So it wasn't until a few weeks later when I went to the tent that I was able to sit with my sisters. And I felt safe enough to say, I'm wondering what your experience was like. Some of them started talking. One said very softly, the butterflies were so beautiful. Luminescent golden, and I could smell the moon. It smelled like pure love, and it just invited me to come closer and closer. And then the voice of a woman with the most ethereal presence whispered, I am Shekhinah, and I am Sophia, and I am you. Move out in strength and joy. My heart was crying out in joy. I wasn't alone. Some of my holy sisters had gentle experiences too. Experiences of brilliant luminosity, of birds that whisper wisdom, and trees that offer strength. And through it all, of it all, it was all love. We talked for hours. We sat together and invoked that love star right there among us. We prayed great gratitude and sang praise. We wondered how such different experiences could happen at the same time in the same place. And then we returned to gratitude and wonder. We are living into our truth, the truth that we experienced. May we all know our truth and live into it with love. The one constant in all our stories is love.
Let's take a few moments to breathe easily and deeply into that truth. In the chat, Rabbi Lynn Steinberg reminds us, listen to and in silence. It teaches more than words can. Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha Kihilat Yaakov. Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha Kihilat Yaakov. Tziva lanu Moshe, tziva lanu Moshe Morasha Kihilat Yaakov. Tziva lanu Moshe, tziva lanu Moshe Morasha Kihilat Yaakov. Ay la la na na na, ay la 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 la, ay la 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 la, ay la la ya, ay na na na, ay la 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 ya, ay la 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 la, ay la la la. By the light, by the Torah's eternal light, 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 that melody always brings us into the Torah that we share, the personal Torah that we share every Shabbat morning at Moshe. When I was studying in the midst of being, my rabbinical training, I suspect this is true for everyone who has gone through that or something similar, that you get into the middle and you wonder, what the heck am I doing? How am I going to find my way? How am I going to swim from the middle of the sea and find the shore? Well, it's usually that there is an angel who comes along and throws you a life raft. And if you're lucky, you have a lot of them, because when you are doing something like that, you need a lot. Rabbi Dan Goldblatt was such an angel for me, reminding me who I am, a storyteller, a musician, a liturgist, but not only that, a mensch. And Dan is a mensch among mensch. Did I mention it? Rabbi Dan.
Thank you, Mark. What an honor to be here on this night of Tikkun Leil Shavuot. Oh, when you first invited me, I thought, I have my own sacred stories that I love to tell. But about 4 or 5 days ago, I woke up in the morning from a very deep sleep, and it just occurred to me that I had a different story that I was meant to tell this evening. I originally discovered this midrash in a book called Jewish Tales of Reincarnation by Yonasan Gershom. He writes that he adopted it from a story called Keepers of the Joy by Rachel Bracha O'Brien. I honor the original title, Shomrei Simcha, Keepers of the Joy. This, dear friends, is a sacred story with great healing power. It is a story I tell every Jew by choice that I have the privilege to work with. It is a perfect story for this night of Tikkun Leil Shavuot. Shomrei Simcha, keepers of the joy. Our rabbis teach us that when all the Jewish souls were gathered at Har Sinai, ready to receive the Torah, it was truly a cosmic event. Cosmic. The soul of every Jew who ever was or would be born was there, either in body or in spirit. Present, past, and future were fused together in one magnificent, timeless moment. And in that moment, HaKadosh Baruch Hu foresaw the entire history of the Jewish people. There would be wonderful times of joy and beauty, with magnificent processions in Yerushalayim, and so many loving family meals around the Shabbat table in so many countries. Throughout the centuries, Jews would nourish their beings, connecting to the spirit of the Jewish people by learning Torah deep into the night, seeking out the hidden meanings within the sacred texts. They would dance in ecstasy as they carried the Sifrei Torah around their shuls on Simchat Torah, and sing with pride and strength as they kindled the Hanukkah licht. Oh, there would be so many wonderful things to celebrate. Oh, births and weddings, songs and poems, the very joy of life itself. But there would also be terrible times of suffering and exile, when the collective soul of the Jewish people would be nearly crushed by sadness. Avdut, slavery, the destruction of the temples, the crusades, the inquisitions, pogrom, the Shoah. So much persecution. so much sorrow. Yes, God could have made a universe where such terrible things never happen, but there would have been no free will. The price of granting freedom to human beings is that they sometimes choose to use it for great harm. But God so valued the wonderful gift of free will that the Holy One of Blessing decided to put up with a world that was often so badly out of balance. Still, God was saddened by the things that would happen to Am Yisrael in the future. Kudsha Brichu could see that there would be times when the suffering would be so horrible and the persecution so brutal that the joy within Judaism would almost be crushed under the weight of sadness. This sadness would become bitterness. A dark heaviness would enter Klal Yisrael. At such times, some Jews would forget the joy of Sinai and would see their Jewishness as nothing but a burden to be cast off at the first opportunity. But where there is illness, there must also be a cure. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu designed a medicine right there at Sinai. What did God do? The Holy One called aside some of the Jewish souls and said, I see in the future that there will come times when the Jewish people will be filled with deep, deep pain. From the very day that they are born, they will be so severely persecuted by the surrounding nations that their souls will become weighted down with depression. This depression will prevent them from soaring into the realms of joy for generations. The souls whom God had called aside were profoundly saddened to hear this dark vision. What can we do? They cried out in despair. Today, I have already planned the medicine, God replied. But I need some brave volunteers. Would some of you be willing to go into exile, into Galut, to remain Jewish neshamas, but be born among the Gentiles? You will grow up in safety and not be persecuted as Jews, but you will also feel out of place among the nations and will long to return to your own people. Your mission will be to carry the joy of Sinai in your hearts, protecting it from bitterness. Whenever the suffering becomes too great for my people to bear, some of you will come back, will convert to Judaism and bring back the happiness that you feel here today. You will be like a time-release medicine, lying dormant in the world until you are needed. Upon hearing what their mission would be, the souls whom God had called aside were silent for a very long time. This was a very difficult thing that God was asking them to do. To spend so many incarnations among the very nations that would oppress the Jewish people. To live so many lives alone and alienated. Yet, in the end, the souls agreed to do it. God blessed them all and said, you shall be known as the Shomrei Simcha, the keepers of the joy. And so it happened. down through the centuries, that in every generation, a few of these keepers of the joy converted to Judaism. Sometimes the Jews who were born as Jews were so filled with pain, they could not understand the bubbling enthusiasm of the keepers of the joy. And sometimes they resented them. But gradually, the joy would spread among the people and the balance would be restored. In past centuries, the keepers of the joy only came in twos or threes because there were persecutions, and there was also great faith, great emunah among the Jews. However, in the 20th century, there came along the Nazis and their leader Adolf Hitler. The suffering under Hitler was so severe, so utterly, unspeakably horrible, that the light of the Jewish people was almost extinguished. Some Jews who survived the Shoah felt utterly abandoned by God and humanity, and many were unable to feel any joy for decades after. And so it happened that in this generation, at the end of the 20th century, more time-released Jewish souls are returning to Judaism than ever before, right into the 21st century. All these neshamas coming forth. This is why there are such large number of people choosing Judaism in modern times, and why they're so filled with this beautiful, beautiful energy. They are not really Jews by choice, as they sometimes call themselves, but souls who are already Jewish, completing their mission from the days of Sinai. They are the Shomrei Simcha, the keepers of the joy.
Entreat me not to leave you. Oh, beg me not to go. Entreat me not to leave you. Oh, beg me not to go. For whither thou goest, I shall go, and whither thou lodgest, I shall lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. From the book of Ruth, the words from Ruth. I guess she was one of those souls, Rabbi Dan. Entreat me not to leave you. Oh, beg me not to go. Entreat me not to leave you. Oh, beg me not to go. For whither thou goest, I shall go, and whither thou lodgest, I shall lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. Many years ago, I heard my colleague, my teacher, my friend, Hanna Tiferet, Rabbi Hanna Tiferet, tell a story about Gan Eden and Chava sitting under the tree. And it's a midrash that blew me away. And so I asked you, Reb Chava, how did you write that? And you answered, Well, I sat under the tree and listened. So I'm wondering whether the midrash that you're about to tell us, or I suspect that the same thing might have happened with Ruth and Naomi.
This is a retelling midrashic style of the Megillat Ruth from the perspective of Naomi. Naomi held the sleeping child in her arms. She never imagined the joy that would follow her many years of suffering. She thought back to stories her mother had told her about her great-grandmother Leah, who had the ability to see beyond the limitations of this world. She was the mother of 7. Some of her children were wise and some were foolish, but each one was blessed. And Yehuda stood out from them all. Leah saw that nothing was as it seemed, and that the intuition of women could dramatically alter the laws of men. When Yehuda's first 2 sons died, he was bereft. His father, Yaakov, had given him the ring of inheritance with the carved seal of a lion and a star. But who would carry this seed if all his sons were dead? He was afraid to give his 3rd son to Tamar. She brought bad luck. But after Yehuda's own wife died, Tamar disguised herself as a harlot to comfort his heart and ensure her tribal honor. Yehuda became the father of twins with Tamar. He gave the ring to his son Peretz, who passed it on to Chezron and then to Ram. Aminadav took it down to Egypt, and Nachshon brought it out again. There was a legend that the one who inherited the ring must seek the most righteous of women to be his wife, and it was she who kept and wore the ring. In the time of the judges, the ring belonged to Boaz and his wife, Adina. I feel like Leah today, said Naomi, as she held little Ovid close and looked over at Ruth, her daughter, asleep in the bed. Naomi lay back, closed her eyes, and once again reviewed the long journey she had endured. We lived in Beit Lechem, a fertile land known for its plentiful grain and fine bakers. I was married to Elimelech from the tribe of Yehudah, who was a judge in the city, along with his cousin Boaz. We had so much: a house, food, clothing, servants, and 2 fine sons. Boaz, on the other hand, was not as fortunate. Despite the ring and a forecast from the Bat Kol that he would be the father of the Messiah, he and Adina had no children. Like Abraham and Sarah, they yearned for the child that God had promised them. My husband, Elimelech, thought he heard the voice of God too, and was certain that kings would come through his loins. He named our boys, not I, saying that God had given him the names Machlon, illness, and Chilion, extinction. Really? As a result, he was very protective and watched over them day and night. It happened gradually, but the effects were devastating. The people had planted for many years without giving the land a rest. So the ground began to dry out. Soon there was not enough grain to feed everyone. The beggars came with their bowls, and Elimelech could not tolerate their presence. Let's get out of here until this trouble passes. We'll take the children, travel until we find food, and return when the drought is over. I tried to convince him not to go. We can't leave our land, Elimelech. Our friends and family are here. I don't want to abandon them when we can help them. The famine will bring us all together. We have so much. Let's share it with those in need. No, I insist. We are leaving tomorrow. We left in the early morning so no one would notice. I packed food and clothing and followed my husband crying. The boys didn't want to leave their friends either, but they would adjust. I knew I never would. We traveled for days until we came to the land of Moab. There was plenty to eat, but I felt the light of my soul contract and fade. The Moabites accepted us because we were wealthy and a good source of information about life in Canaan. We had shunned them because of their alien worship. Now we chose them and rejected our own people. Moabite customs were very different from ours, and I always felt like a stranger. The boys saw me crying week after week, and they wanted to go home too, but children seek out children. I tried to teach them our traditions, but they learned more from their friends than from me. I made Elimelech promise that we would return as soon as the famine ended, but it was not to be. One evening, as the sun set and the moon rose, Elimelech called out that he did not feel well, and then suddenly he died. I never felt so alone as I sat on the ground, holding him in my arms. Where could I bury him, and who would comfort me? We dug a grave under a fig tree in the field by our house, and there we lay his lifeless body to rest. I couldn't return home. I was too ashamed. So we stayed for 10 years. During that time, Machlon and Chilion grew into young men, and they were offered positions in King Eglon's court. They were known for their wit and kindness and attracted the interest of the king's daughters. When they came home with plans of marriage, Machlon was to marry Ruth, and Chilion was in love with Orpah. I liked Ruth and Orpah. Their mother had died when they were young girls, so they enjoyed talking to me. I shared our ways and customs with them, and we would sing, eat, and laugh into the early morning hours. Even Machlon and Chilion seemed interested now, but there was a shadow over our house. For the first time in a long time, I prayed for help. That night I had a dream. Many people were gathered around a dry well, weeping and wailing. There were heavy clouds and the air was tense with fear. Without warning, a brilliant light flashed through the darkness and everyone gasped. The heavens opened and an downpour of cool water soaked the parched earth. They joined hands and danced in a circle around the well. And when they looked up, I recognized their faces, my friends from Beit Lechem. When I woke in the morning, I knew the time had come to return home. I told the children, and they decided to come with me. As we began to pack, the sky grew dark, and I could not breathe. It was not a good omen. Both of my sons, Machlon and Chilion, became gravely ill and died within a week of each other. A mother should never have to witness the death of her own children. My heart was torn open. I mourned with Ruth and Orpah, and during that time we grew even closer. But now my resolve to leave was greater than ever. When I was strong enough to travel, I told them that they must remain in Moab. There was nothing for them in my homeland. They would always be strangers. Who would they marry? The daughters of a king would be beggars. As I set out on my journey, they both followed. A voice inside me said, "Warn them 3 times. You must try to send them away." So 3 times I told them to return. Finally, Orpah burst into tears and agreed to turn back. We hugged and kissed and swore that we would always remember each other, but Ruth continued to follow me. Once more, I thought, once more I will try to send her back. Go back to your people, Ruth. No, Mother, listen to me. I am no longer a daughter of Moab. You have been my teacher, and it is your ways I choose. El Asher telchi elei, uvasher talini ali. Amen, Amen, Velohai, Elohai. Where you go, I will follow. Where you sleep, I will rest too. Your people are my people, and your God, my source of truth. Ruth was determined. What could I do? I accepted her as my own, and we began walking the long distance together. I retraced my steps and relived my choices. When we reached the shores of the River Jordan, I said, let's immerse together, a new beginning for us both. During these years away, I have lost so much. I'm old and withered, and I'm afraid they will make fun of me and of you, the Moabite. As we sank down in the cool, clear waters, Ruth consoled me. Don't worry, dear mother. The food we seek comes from God. The praise we seek comes from God. The joy we seek comes from God. You don't know how beautiful you are. The lines on your face tell the story of your life. The light of your soul is a comfort to the weary. They will not mock us for long. We floated like children in the healing waters, then crossed to the other side and walked with anticipation toward Beit Lechem. When we arrived, people were celebrating the beginning of the barley harvest. As we drew closer, we overheard the conversation. Too bad Boaz's wife died, married 50 years and no child to show for it. He always believed the prophecy of the Bat Kol. Only an act of God can change his destiny now. The fields were full of grain again, and people were cutting the barley, bundling each omer and bringing it to the center of town. As we entered Beit Lechem, people noticed us and whispered, "Is that Naomi?" She left a wealthy, proud woman. She returns withered and poor. And who is that young foreign woman with her? I couldn't hold my tongue. Yes, I shouted. It is Naomi, but do not call me pleasant, for I am Mara, bitter. I was cursed for leaving, and the joy of life was taken from my breasts. I beg your mercy and forgiveness, and please accept my son's wife, Ruth. She has joined our people. Ruth and I found our way back to our family land. Sand, dust, and insects filled the house. The fields were parched and barren, but we began to make a home for ourselves. After a short while, Ruth said, "Mother, I cannot bear to accept the handouts of your friends who look at us with pity favorably upon me, and I can glean in his fields with the poor." She walked out into the sunlight, and I remember watching her step confidently into the unknown. This was the first time she had left my side. Where would I lead her? In the evening, she returned, full of stories of our kinsman Boaz, who noticed her in his field. He invited her to glean every day with the young women and warned the young men to respect her. Ruth gleaned throughout the Omer. As I thought about her situation, I remembered the custom among people that the next of kin marries a childless widow for the honor of her dead husband. And if Boaz still believes he will sire the Mashiach, I had to tell her, Ruth, yes, Naomi, tonight is the end of the barley harvest. Boaz will be threshing the grain with his workers and sleeping on the floor of the granary to watch over his crop. As the sun sets, go to him, dressed in your finest clothes, and lie down at his feet. When he wakes, ask him to redeem you and our family honor. My heart is drawn to Boaz. True, he is twice my age, but he is wise and generous. I will do as you say. She donned the dark cloak of a widow and slipped away at dusk. Meanwhile, Boaz, who had exerted all of his physical strength during the day, lay down exhausted. He was soon absorbed by a vision of Ruth tempting him to sleep with her. No, I must not. I am waiting, even in my old age, for the one to carry the seed of redemption. When the temptation became uncomfortably real, he awoke and found Ruth lying at his uncovered feet. Is that you, my dear Ruth? Yes, Boaz. I come to ask you to redeem the honor of my family. You are our closest relative. Please spread your wing of acceptance over me. Oh, Ruth, I did not dare approach you, for I am old and you are young. Your request is an answer to my prayers. It would be my honor to call you my bride. There is, however, another kinsman who is younger and more desirable than I. It is you that I choose, Boaz, answered Ruth tenderly. Then we will be married tomorrow. Stay with me until dawn, for it is not safe for you to walk alone in the night. Our time together will be a pledge of my devotion. Boaz wrapped his coat around her, but every time he drew too close, she reminded him that he must wait until they were wed. Before the sun rose, Ruth and Boaz went their separate ways. He went to the gate of the city, removed his sandal before the elders, and swore that he would redeem Ruth. That day there was great feasting. As Ruth and Boaz were married, he placed the ring of the tribe of Yehudah on her finger. Later, as they lay in sweet embrace, Boaz felt his purpose fulfilled, and Ruth knew that she had been welcomed as a mother in Israel. Ovid cried, and Naomi opened her eyes. My dear child, you have brought milk back to my breasts and joy to my heart. Your mother's ancestors, the Moabites, were born from the desperate relationship of Abraham's nephew Lot with his older daughter, and forbidden in marriage to the Jews due to their lack of generosity. Yet Ruth is known for her great chesed. Among your descendants will be kings and prophets. The forbidden is forgiven and transformed by the revelation, of unexpected possibility. Your father's tribe of Yehudah, Yud, He, Vav, He, has a dalet, a door, God consciousness. Through you and all who live the Yehudi path, a stream of redemption flows. Teach your children well from the Torah of compassion. Listen to the wisdom of women and know that the hand of God is always guiding you.
Whither thou goest, I shall go, and whither thou lodgest, I shall lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall